So, welcome. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our guest artist for this month's workshop. Her name is Talamieka Brice, and the title of this workshop is called Living History, an exploration of the artist as scribe. Just to tell you a little bit about Talamieka, she is an award-winning artist, photographer, and visual storyteller. She serves as CEO for Brice Media, which she co-founded with her husband. They create marketing campaigns for companies, including the American Heart Association, and they recently completed the Barack Obama mural for the newly minted Barack Obama Elementary School. She resides in Ridgeland, Mississippi, and I had the honor of meeting Talamieka during our Southeast Artist Network tour in the fall of 2023. And so I was so excited to be able to have her back for this session. So I'm going to hand it over to Talamieka Brice. And feel free to give us your virtual claps and snaps and reactions so she can feel the love. Talamieka.
Thanks so much, Felice. I'm so excited to be here with you guys. It's so cool to see where everyone is from. As Felice mentioned, I identify as a Black Southern storyteller. I began my craft in the state of Mississippi, is where I currently reside. I have done a number of things from writing to, which you'll see a bit in, to filmmaking is where I've landed now. So I progressed from a visual artist to film during the pandemic. And the first film I think you guys may have seen, but I'm going to show a clip of it. It happened during 2020, which of course was the pandemic. During the pandemic, as a lot of artists, I had an art show, things kind of dried up. And before that, because the world closed, and before that, I judged an art festival before, and it was great films, but I didn't see anything I really identified with. I didn't see anything that really led credence to my voice. And through my connections with different storytellers that were also filmmakers, they encouraged me to explore film. So during the pandemic is when I created my first film. Called Five: A Mother's Journey. And that film has since gone on to to win a number of awards across the world. I think it's been featured in 25 festivals across the world and won about 30 awards. And with that, what I realized with a lot of the work that I do is the importance of storytelling. When you think about ancient civilizations, one of the major things they look at to see who the people were in their stories is the art, the left behind pieces. And when I was around 16, I fell in love with Shakespeare. I thought Shakespeare was a Black woman because no one writes pain like Shakespeare. And it's at the end of one of his sonnets, he says, "So long as man can breathe and eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee." So it's this motto that I take into everything that I create, whether it be a logo or a painting or a film. And during these historic times that we're living in, it's our voices that need to be heard and told. We've been given so many different avenues in order to explore and expand that. So with this workshop, I'm going to share a little bit of the work that I've done and see uh, how to utilize different talk about how to utilize the different tools that are accessible to us to be able to amplify your voice and tell your stories, because it even goes back to the beginning of civilization, in the Lascaux caves, when they found the drawings of the different bisons and the animals. You had the particular person that left their handprint, like, I was here and I mattered. So during this time, very historic, very tumultuous time in history, it is important for us, the storytellers, to say that I am here and I matter. And I will give an example of that through this short clip from the film Five: A Mother's Journey, just to kind of give you a bit more background and let you guys be able to see how I utilize that in my storytelling.
Is it tragedy or triumph that the breath swallowed in grave was witnessed by those you love, opposed to those that hated you? Too many Black Americans were bound and shackled by the hands of white supremacy, made into monsters to justify their history of slavery, burned at altars, sacrifices to an unholy God that demanded their lives. White hands stained with the blood of brown humans, tainting the mirage of a just and equal America. Their existence reduced to black and white photos and headlines. We've plowed the fields, harvested the crops, all the while looking for our own flowers. When your heart is stilled and you're planted in earth's womb, your deeds sprout forth across generations. Therefore, plant well. I saw his face, and in it, those I loved stared back at me. My son, my husband, my brothers. I saw his face, mouth open, eyes closed, face tilted to the heavens, rope around his neck in a fatal embrace. I saw his face, and it reminded me of the stories my grandmother told of Bootjack McDaniels, who was tortured and lynched yards from her doorstep. She spoke of his screams mixed with the laughter of white mobs that pierced the night sky, and how no black person moved in fear of joining that symphony. This story is not old, this face is new, but it is the narrative of America. It stands rooted in the soil and soul of the South. And this lyric is about Mississippi. Roosevelt Towns and Robert McDaniels, two black men, were lynched on April 13, 1937 in Duck Hill, Mississippi by a white mob after being labeled as the murderers of a white storekeeper. They had only been legally accused of the crime a few minutes before they were kidnapped from the courthouse, chained to trees, and tortured with a blowtorch. Following the torture, McDaniels was shot to death, and Towns was burned alive. Pictures taken prior to Towns being lit on fire were the first lynching photographs to be published by the national press. They were reprinted in Time magazine and Life magazine, and then in national newspapers. Internationally, German newspapers publicized the murders to support Nazi government propaganda, contrasting the violence of the lynchings to its treatment of the Jewish population. There was an anti-lynching bill also introduced in the House of Representatives that ultimately failed. In dissent, one lawmaker stated, "We shall, at all cost, preserve the white supremacy of America."
We didn't shoot him. You did. They killed him. And that wasn't right. So he's the guy.
I had to go there. I had to lay eyes on it. I had to confront the shadows that haunted my childhood. If I was going to move forward into my destiny, if I was going to fully be, I had to embrace my history. You can't paint a good portrait without shadows. The light needs the darkness. To help paint a clearer picture of what happened that night, I enlisted the help of a local historian and activist, Al White. This place, was it mixed back then, or was it primarily African American?
It was primarily mixed, you know. I can recall stories of with my uncle and the community, you know, working together, sharing things together, playing together. So they had here in the rural they had a relationship, right? In terms of a mixed relationship. I understand the store owner was, you know, very lenient in terms of credit with African Americans. So I think it was a pretty good working relationship, given the standards at that time in terms of, you know, the color barrier, separation, that kind of thing.
So what happened at the store? What's that part of the story?
Well, from what I was told, that it was pretty much like, I've heard several different versions, but I heard that it was pretty much a robbery in terms of what got the crowd after those gentlemen to want to lynch them. And so I understand that the store owner was a, you know, very kind and friendly person, but from what I'm told, that's what happened. It was pretty much a robbery.
So they accused it was Bootjack.
The nicknames were Bootjack and Red. Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Right.
And with the thing that was in Life magazine, so the story goes that they were this was the catalyst. This particular lynching was the catalyst that led to the anti-lynching law.
Correct.
Could you expound a little bit, because you said a little bit about camera, like what was going on in Germany as opposed to what was going on in America at the time?
Sure. In the documentary by Henry Hampton that he did, was called The Great Depression, and he focused on the anti-lynching period where there was legislation going on in Washington, D.C., and the boll weavers from the South were saying they didn't need that kind of legislation, that lynching was not happening, and all of a sudden, this incident occurred here in Montgomery County. And in his documentary, the photo that he used came out of a German newspaper, and that was being highlighted by, you know, the Germans in terms of the United States talking about their issues with the Jews, the things that he was doing, right? And so they wanted to highlight what America was doing in terms of the treatment of African Americans here in this country. And so that's what got this particular story in the international spotlight.
And there we stood in that unholy place, that sanctuary, that sacred ground, only yards from where their cries exited their bodies, pierced the night sky, and echoes across generations, from my grandmother to myself to George Floyd's murder that was going viral in that very moment. I want to say to the ground, do you remember? To the trees, are you rooted in their blood? Are your leaves the blossom of injustice? Do their screams cradle your branches? Just yards from the scene, we visited the store where the owner, George Wyndham, was fatally shot. A crime left unsolved and paid in black blood. What is a black life worth? Is it 3/5 of a white one? Does it depreciate in value when gender and sexuality are factors? Is it worthy to breathe free air without the stench of inequality? Since we stepped off auction blocks, America has consistently underestimated our value.
We are confronted primarily with a moral issue. It is as old as the Scriptures and is as clear as the American Constitution. The heart of the question is whether all Americans are to be afforded equal rights and equal opportunities, whether we are going to treat our fellow Americans as we want to be treated. If an American, because his skin is dark, cannot eat lunch in a restaurant open to the public, if he cannot send his children to the best public school available, if he cannot vote for the public officials who represent him, if, in short, he cannot enjoy the full and free life which all of us want, then who among us would be content to have the color of his skin changed and stand in his place? Who among us would then be content with the counsels of patience and delay? 100 years of delay have passed since President Lincoln freed the slaves, yet their heirs, their grandsons, are not fully free. They are not yet freed from the bonds of injustice. They are not yet freed from social and economic oppression. And this nation, for all its hopes and all its boasts, will not be fully free until all its citizens are free.
There's always a weight to be added to the histories we learn about this country. The tales are authored by men whose stories were the loud.
So it ends by saying that the tales are often authored by men whose stories were the loudest and the bloodiest. And I think that really feeds into where we are today, and that the tools that we have allow us to author our own stories. Zora Neale Hurston once said something that was to the effect that if you don't tell your story, then they will kill you and say that you liked it. So at this present time, I think this really goes into our writing prompts at this point in time with everything that is going on in this world, from the trial of a former president to this upcoming election to the horrors in Gaza. There isn't a short to the access to reproductive rights, to abortion access. There isn't a shortage of things that we are not in some way involved in. This is our history. We are living history. And it is up to us to tell the story of who we are, how we feel, and why we matter, because we all do. So I'm going to leave those prompts up to you to think about in your everyday life with everything you're going through. Like I'm a mother, but I'm also a daughter. And my mom is in fairly good health, but there's also this sandwich generation where you're taking care of both your younger kids and your older parents at the same time. There is social security, will it even be there? How is it an entitlement for things that we've already paid into? There are all these different things across the world. Like I noticed someone else talking about being able to vote in another country. Like, how beautiful and amazing is that? I just really want to take this time and prompt you guys to think about what is going on, not only in your life, but in your heart, and start to jot some of that down. Just, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be full sentences. It could just be words like, I am, if it's cool or hot, or use all your five senses, what you see, what you smell, if you had coffee earlier, what you taste. Like, tell me, and in a sense, tell the world who you are and how you feel. So I'm just going to leave that prompt up to you guys and give you a few minutes to brainstorm some of your ideas. And also, this could lead into the creative writing time. So we're going to give you guys roughly 10 minutes to just take some time and jot all of this down. And when that's done, we'll proceed into breakout rooms where you could share some of your stories.
Thank you very much for setting us up for that, Talamieka. So this next 10 minutes is yours to do it with you will. We'll play some music for you. Feel free to shut your cameras off, and we'll welcome everyone back to the room as a group in 10 minutes, and then we'll go out into our breakout rooms. And so with our last remaining minutes, we wanted to open this up for a conversation. So I know we didn't get a chance to share our reactions as a group to the clip that we watched. If you want to talk about what that sparked for you in your creative process, I would like to start with a question for Talamieka. I would just love to hear a little more about how you discovered your personal story was connected to this historic event,
Mm.
and how you decided that was something you wanted to pursue artistically.
Um, so I heard the story from my grandmother when I was about 5. And you know how sometimes you kind of little back porch stories, you hear it and you just kind of tuck it away. But then sometimes you like discount stories because, I heard it, but it just kind of sat there. And I was studying art at Jackson State University. And while I was there, I came across this other artist's work that was called Accused Blowtorch, and it just stopped me in my tracks. And it was a picture of a man like tied with a chain to a tree. And the artist wrote around it all this stuff that the audience automatically feels like, why couldn't you let him go? Who did this? And at the very bottom, it had Duck Hill, Mississippi. And that's when it hit me. This is the lynching that my grandmother told me about. So I was in my 20s then. So fast forward, I graduated college, I'm out doing things, and then I just started researching more and more about it. And I found out that that lynching was the first photos published nationally by both Time magazine and Life magazine in 1937. And while I was doing the documentary, I went ahead and ordered those original copies. So I have them now. And it just given birth to Honor, which the documentary goes more into detail about him being birthed during the Ferguson riots and his third birthday being Charlottesville, like all of this stuff that I was trying to stuff just started coming out in different places. And I just realized during the pandemic, when the whole world just kind of shut down, I had nothing to do but to deal with my stuff that was all coming up. So the documentary itself is my attempt to take my stuff and makes it something beautiful for other people to be able to find themselves in and start to unpack their stuff too.
Thank you so much for that. We have time for one more question or comment. So I'm going to be a good teacher and just wait patiently.
How can you see the entire film? There is a version on my website, talamieka.com. If you go to film, it's a link there where you could purchase, you could rent it or purchase it.
Thank you. And Talamieka, do you have a GoFundMe or a Kickstarter or a link we could share? We could share it in the follow-up email if you want to send it to me later. I know you mentioned fundraising for the next documentary.
I do actually, and it's on bootjackred.com.
Okay.
That's
Awesome.
where the link that you guys saw is, and that's
Mhm.
where the GoFundMe is.
One of the things I was struck by in watching this clip again, but also just knowing some of your work, is your ability to take some of the most horrific things, right, and find the beauty, right, make art out of it. And I'm wondering if you might say a little bit about that in closing. How do you do that, or why do you do that, or the necessity of doing that?
I think it's one of those where, being an African American, a Black Southerner, I'm and a mother, I think about, I don't know any mom that looks at these images and doesn't really see their babies. I don't know any Black mother who looks at any of it. And when George Floyd called out to his mom, I want to create something that engages the audience and let them find the beauty in the ugliness of every day, and to know that you are not powerless, you're powerful, and telling these stories and changing the narrative, and your voice and who you are matters.
Amazing. Can we get a virtual round of applause for Talamieka? Thank you so much for sharing your time and your talent and your heart and your spirit with us.